What happens when someone who is expected to be there suddenly disappears, and the timing is just a little too suspicious to ignore? On General Hospital, a simple missed performance can become the starting point for a much bigger mystery. And now, attention is turning toward Kai, the Cat's Eye Lounge, and Trina's upcoming performance. Why would Kai suddenly disappear? Is there an innocent explanation for his absence, or could something happening behind the scenes at the Cat's Eye Lounge be keeping him away? Trina's performance should be a moment of excitement, especially with so much anticipation surrounding her and the people in her orbit. But if Kai really does miss the performance, viewers may naturally begin asking questions. Was he supposed to be there? Did something change at the last minute? And perhaps most importantly, where exactly is Kai? The Cat's Eye Lounge has already established itself as a place where unexpected conversations, complicated relationships, and secrets can collide. So when a character disappears around the same time that important events are unfolding there, it is difficult not to wonder whether these storylines could eventually connect. Of course, there is a major difference between a confirmed spoiler and a theory based on what viewers are seeing. So in this video, we're going to carefully break down what Kai's disappearance could mean, why Trina's performance may become important, what role the Cat's Eye Lounge could play, and the biggest questions General Hospital could be setting up for the next chapter. Could Kai simply have another obligation? Could he be avoiding someone? Or is his disappearance a clue that something much bigger is happening? Let's break down the mystery. Kai's absence becomes interesting because of the timing. In a soap opera, someone missing from a major personal or social moment can sometimes mean absolutely nothing. Actors have schedules, storylines shift, scenes are rearranged, and not every character can appear in every episode. But when an absence happens around an emotionally important event, viewers naturally start asking whether there is something more happening behind the scenes. That is what makes Kai's situation worth examining. His expected connection to the current storyline gives his disappearance a little more weight than it might otherwise have. If viewers have been following Kai's interactions with Trina and the people around her, then seeing him suddenly absent when Trina has an important performance can create an obvious question. Why isn't he there? Of course, that question should not automatically become an accusation or a spoiler. There is a major difference between something that feels suspicious and something that has actually been confirmed. At this point, viewers should be careful about turning Kai's absence into a definite storyline explanation when the available information may not establish one. But soaps thrive on precisely this kind of uncertainty. The timing surrounding Trina's performance is especially interesting because performances often create opportunities for characters to gather in one place. Friends, family members, romantic interests, and other familiar faces can all become part of the emotional atmosphere. When someone viewers expect to see is missing, that absence can become noticeable simply because everyone else is there. And that brings us directly to Trina. Would she notice Kai isn't there? That depends on how important his presence has become to her at this point in the story. If Kai has been someone Trina expects to see, then his absence could potentially register emotionally, even if she doesn't immediately confront anyone about it. She might continue with her performance, maintain her composure, and focus on the moment, while still wondering privately why someone important isn't present. That kind of emotional tension can be more powerful than an immediate confrontation. Imagine Trina preparing for her performance, surrounded by people who are there to support her. She has every reason to be excited and focused. Yet somewhere in the back of her mind, there could be one unanswered question: where is Kai? That doesn't necessarily mean something terrible has happened. It doesn't necessarily mean Kai has deliberately avoided her. And it certainly doesn't prove that his absence is connected to a secret storyline. But it does create an opening for questions. Could Kai be dealing with something completely unrelated? Could another storyline have pulled him away? Could his absence simply be a practical production decision? Or could the writers be intentionally leaving him out because they want viewers to notice that something is changing? Those are possibilities, not confirmations. And that's an important distinction when discussing General Hospital spoilers. Viewers often receive promotional material, previews, rumors, and carefully worded teases that encourage speculation. But speculation becomes misleading when it is presented as fact. So for now, the most reasonable conclusion is that Kai's absence is interesting because of when it occurs, not because we can definitively explain why it occurs. There is also another layer to consider. Kai's absence could affect Trina socially, even if it doesn't immediately affect her romantically. A missing person changes the dynamic of a group. If everyone expects Kai to be part of the occasion and he isn't there, other characters may have to respond. Someone might ask about him. Someone else might attempt to distract Trina. Another character could unexpectedly become her primary source of support. And in a soap opera, those small changes can have consequences. A seemingly innocent question like, "Where's Kai?" could open the door to information that viewers weren't expecting. A character's unusual reaction could make Trina suspicious. Or perhaps nothing happens at all, leaving viewers to wonder whether they simply read too much into the situation. That uncertainty is part of the appeal. The most fascinating possibility may actually be that Kai's disappearance creates more questions than answers. If there is no immediate explanation, viewers are left with a gap, and gaps in a long-running soap storyline tend to invite theories. Could Kai return at exactly the moment Trina needs him? Could his absence allow another relationship or friendship to move forward? Could Trina eventually confront him about missing an important moment? Or will the storyline reveal that his absence had nothing to do with Trina whatsoever? Right now, those questions are more useful than pretending we already know the answers. And there is one final thing worth remembering. Trina's performance doesn't have to become important because of Kai alone. The event itself could become a turning point. Kai's absence may simply be one piece of a much larger storyline developing around Trina. Which brings us to the performance itself. Trina's performance could initially look like a straightforward event, a chance for her to step into the spotlight and show another side of herself. But on General Hospital, ordinary events rarely stay ordinary for very long. A performance gives the show a natural gathering point. It creates a setting where multiple characters can interact without the scene feeling forced. People can arrive to show support, relationships can be tested, conversations can happen away from the usual hospital or family settings, and unexpected developments can unfold while everyone is focused on something else. That's why the people who are present can matter just as much as the person performing. For Trina, having familiar people around her could provide emotional reassurance. A performance can be exciting, but it can also be vulnerable. Standing in front of an audience means putting yourself out there, and knowing that people you care about are watching can make that experience even more meaningful. So if Kai is noticeably absent, the atmosphere could feel different. Again, we shouldn't automatically assume Trina will be devastated or that his absence represents a major romantic betrayal. That would go beyond what can reasonably be established. But if Kai matters to Trina, even in a relatively simple way, she could notice that he isn't among the people supporting her. And sometimes, the absence of one person becomes more noticeable because of everyone else's presence. Trina might look into the audience and see familiar faces. She might receive encouragement from friends. She might share a moment with someone unexpected. She might even discover that the person she thought would be there isn't there at all. That can create an emotional beat without requiring an immediate dramatic confrontation. The bigger question is whether someone else could step into the role viewers expected Kai to occupy. Soap operas are constantly reshuffling relationships. When one character is unavailable, another character often gets the opportunity to become more important within the scene. That doesn't necessarily mean romance. It could be friendship, mentorship, emotional support, or simply a conversation that wouldn't have happened if Kai had been present. And that possibility could make Trina's performance more significant than viewers initially expect. Think about how these moments work structurally. Trina has a public event. People gather around her. Everyone has an opportunity to observe one another. A character who has been distant could suddenly appear. Someone could make an unexpected comment. Someone else could react badly to something they see. The performance becomes the backdrop. The real story happens around it. That is one of the classic strengths of General Hospital. A seemingly normal social event can become the stage for a much larger emotional development. The audience may think they're watching a performance, while the writers are actually using the occasion to move several relationships forward at the same time. And if Kai is missing, that absence could become part of that storytelling mechanism. Perhaps Trina simply notices and moves on. Perhaps she asks someone where he is. Perhaps someone gives her an explanation that doesn't completely satisfy her. Or perhaps another character sees an opportunity to become closer to Trina, while Kai is nowhere around. None of these possibilities should be treated as confirmed unless the show establishes them. But they are worth considering because of the way soap storytelling works. There's also the possibility that Trina's reaction tells us more than Kai's absence itself. If she barely reacts, that could suggest that her priorities have shifted. If she becomes visibly disappointed, it could show that Kai's presence matters more than she has admitted. If she immediately starts asking questions, it could indicate that something about his disappearance feels unusual to her. Her response could become the real clue. And that's why viewers may want to pay attention not just to dialogue, but to body language, reactions, and who Trina turns toward when the moment arrives. Who is standing beside her? Who encourages her? Who does she look for? Who notices her reaction? Those details can sometimes tell a soap audience more than a dramatic speech. At the same time, it is important not to overinterpret every glance or interaction. General Hospital has a huge ensemble cast, and characters can share scenes without those scenes necessarily signaling a new relationship or storyline. The strongest approach is to watch for patterns. One interaction means one thing. Repeated interactions mean something else. And when those interactions happen alongside a character's unexplained absence, viewers naturally begin putting the pieces together. That's where the Kai mystery becomes especially intriguing. His absence may not be the main story. It could simply be the detail that makes viewers look closer at everything happening around Trina. Because once viewers start asking why Kai isn't there, they may also start asking who is there and why. Could the performance bring Trina closer to someone unexpected? Could it expose tension between characters who were already struggling? Could it reveal that Kai's absence has a completely different explanation? Or could this entire mystery turn out to be a deliberate misdirection? At this stage, we don't have to choose one answer. Sometimes the smartest way to approach a General Hospital spoiler mystery is to keep several possibilities open while waiting for the actual story to provide the evidence. And with Trina's performance putting so many characters into the same emotional space, the smallest moment could potentially become the one viewers remember. Because the real question isn't simply whether Kai misses the performance. The real question is what happens because he does. At this point, one of the biggest questions surrounding the Cat's Eye Lounge mystery is also the simplest. Where exactly is Kai? His absence has become noticeable because the timing feels important, especially with Trina's performance approaching. But before we assume there is some elaborate secret behind his disappearance, it is worth considering the most ordinary explanation first. Sometimes, the most obvious explanation really is the correct one. Kai could have another responsibility, another commitment, or something happening away from Port Charles that has nothing whatsoever to do with Trina. Soap operas are filled with characters who disappear from one storyline because another part of their lives suddenly demands attention. And that distinction matters. Just because Kai is missing at a significant moment does not automatically mean that his absence was caused by Trina, their relationship, or anything happening at the Cat's Eye Lounge. Viewers can connect the timing. But timing alone is not proof of a connection. Still, that doesn't stop the questions. If Kai knew that Trina's performance was important, why wouldn't he make an effort to be there? Was the event something he genuinely planned to attend? Did circumstances change at the last minute, or was his absence completely expected from the beginning? Those questions become even more interesting if Trina herself was expecting to see him. Now let's consider a more complicated possibility. This is where the mystery begins to take on a different tone. What if Kai isn't simply busy? What if he deliberately chose not to be somewhere because he didn't want to have a difficult conversation? Maybe there is an unresolved relationship issue. Maybe there is tension involving another character. Or perhaps Kai knows that showing up would force him to address something he would rather avoid. Avoidance is particularly interesting in a soap storyline because characters rarely disappear emotionally without consequences. When someone chooses silence instead of confrontation, that silence can become its own message. But again, there is no confirmation that Kai is actually avoiding anyone. It is simply one possible explanation for viewers to consider. Possibility number 3, Kai may know something. And this is where the cat's eye lounge becomes particularly intriguing. Could Kai have discovered information that made him uncomfortable? Could he have witnessed something, overheard a conversation, or learned something that changed his plans? If there is something unusual happening around the lounge, then Kai's absence could potentially become another piece of that puzzle. But there is an important line between asking a question and declaring an answer. At this stage, viewers should not treat the idea that Kai knows a secret as established fact. There may be no secret at all. There may be no connection between Kai and whatever mystery viewers think is developing. However, if General Hospital later reveals that Kai knew more than he was saying, his disappearance could suddenly look very different in retrospect. And that brings us to possibility number 4. The disappearance itself could be setting up a future reveal. Soap operas often introduce seemingly minor details and give them greater meaning later. A missed event, an unexplained absence, a strange conversation, or a character who suddenly becomes difficult to reach can sometimes become important only after another storyline develops. That doesn't mean every unexplained detail is a clue. Sometimes a missing character is simply a missing character. But if Kai's absence eventually connects to another revelation, viewers may look back at this moment and realize that the show was quietly drawing attention to him for a reason. For now, the safest conclusion is that there are several possibilities, but no single explanation should be treated as confirmed unless the show actually establishes it. And perhaps the most important question isn't just where Kai went. It's what his absence means for Trina. Kai missing Trina's performance could matter for one very simple reason. Important moments can reveal how much one person matters to another. Imagine Trina preparing for a performance, surrounded by the pressure, excitement, and anticipation that comes with putting herself out there. In a moment like that, the people she expects to see can become incredibly important. And if Kai is one of those people, his absence could leave an emotional gap. Would Trina be disappointed? Absolutely, that's one possibility. She may have expected Kai to show up. She may have wanted his support, and if he doesn't appear, she could begin wondering why. But disappointment doesn't necessarily become anger. It could just as easily become confusion. Trina might ask herself whether something happened to Kai. Was he unable to come? Did he choose not to come? Did she misunderstand how important the event was to him? Those questions could create emotional tension without requiring a dramatic betrayal. And then there is another possibility, suspicion. If Kai's disappearance comes at an unusual time, Trina may begin wondering whether there is more to the story. That doesn't mean she would immediately assume the worst, but unanswered questions have a way of changing relationships. When communication breaks down, people start filling in the blanks themselves. And that can be dangerous. If Trina begins interpreting Kai's absence as a sign that he doesn't care, she could create emotional distance before she even knows the real reason he disappeared. That distance could become especially significant if Kai returns later and expects everything to be normal. Because what happens when one person believes the other abandoned them during an important moment? A simple explanation might not be enough. Kai could say that he had no choice. Trina could respond that he should have communicated. Kai might insist that circumstances prevented him from being there. Trina might argue that she deserved to know. Suddenly, the missed performance isn't just about one night anymore. It becomes about trust. And that's where another character could potentially influence Trina while Kai is away. If someone else steps in to support her, listen to her, or simply be present when Kai isn't, that could subtly change the emotional balance. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean a new romance is coming. Sometimes another character's importance comes from friendship, encouragement, or emotional support rather than romance. But in a soap opera, even a seemingly innocent interaction can create questions about where someone's loyalties and feelings are heading. Trina could discover that she doesn't want to spend her time chasing someone who refuses to communicate. Or, alternatively, Kai's absence could make her realize just how much she wanted him there. That second possibility may be even more emotionally powerful. Sometimes people don't fully understand the importance of a relationship until something interrupts it. If Trina spends the entire performance wondering where Kai is, that could tell her something about her own feelings. His absence could force her to confront emotions she had previously been able to ignore. And then comes the inevitable question. What happens when Kai finally returns? If he comes back with a reasonable explanation, the situation could become a moment of vulnerability between the two characters. But if his explanation raises even more questions, Trina may not be willing to simply accept it. That could lead to a confrontation, not necessarily an explosive one, but an emotional conversation where both characters finally say what they've been holding back. Kai may have his reasons. Trina may have her own expectations. And somewhere between those two perspectives could be the real story. For viewers, the most interesting part is that Kai's absence doesn't have to mean the end of something between them. It could actually become the beginning of a more complicated chapter. Because sometimes, in Port Charles, what a character doesn't do can be just as revealing as what they actually say. And if Kai really is connected to the mystery surrounding the Cat's Eye Lounge, then his return could potentially answer one question while creating 5 more. The key is watching what happens next and separating what the show actually confirms from what viewers are simply imagining. So the biggest question now isn't simply whether Kai misses Trina's performance, it's why his absence could matter. The Cat's Eye Lounge, Kai's unexplained disappearance, and Trina's important moment create several pieces of a puzzle that General Hospital could eventually connect in a much bigger way. Maybe Kai has a completely innocent reason for being absent, or maybe his disappearance is quietly setting the stage for a confrontation, a revelation, or another unexpected twist. Until the show provides those answers, the most important thing is to keep the confirmed details separate from the theories and watch what happens next. Because if Kai suddenly reappears with an explanation that changes everything, viewers may look back at this missed performance and realize it was never just a coincidence. What do you think? Where is Kai? And could the Cat's Eye Lounge hold the answer? Let us know your theories in the comments. And if you enjoyed this General Hospital breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more spoilers, theories, and storyline updates. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.